Welcome back to Askewed Reviews. And as I'm continuing to do so, I'm going through all of Kevin Smith's films. And today I am doing the 2010 movie Cop Out. Here is your trivia question for today. What baseball card is Jimmy trying to sell to pay for his daughter's wedding? The answer will be at the end of this episode. So in New York, we have a pair of NYPD detectives, Jimmy and Paul. Paul is a bit unorthodox, and Jimmy is the old grizzled veteran. Now, one day while these partners are working together, they unfortunately allow their informant to get shot. Jimmy and Paul are then suspended because of this, which causes a huge issue for Jimmy, as his daughter just recently asked if he would be willing to pay for her wedding. So, to not let his ex wife and her new husband swoop in and look like the heroes, Jimmy decides that he's going to sell off a baseball card he's been holding on to for quite some time. Now, as luck would have it, that very day, a couple of armed robbers come into the pawn shop and manage to run off with that card. The card then ends up in the possession of a drug dealer named Po' Boy. Jimmy and Paul see if they can try to attempt to sneak in and steal the card back, but are discovered. So Po' Boy makes a deal with them. If these two cops can go and retrieve a car that was stolen from him, he'll give them the card in return. So Jimmy and Paul do end up finding the vehicle, but within the trunk happens to be Gabriella, the mistress of Po' Boy's rival. So will Jimmy and Paul turn over Gabriella to Po' Boy? And will Jimmy ever get his baseball card back? This movie was directed by Kevin Smith, but it wasn't written by him, and this would be the first time that he directed and didn't write the film. The writers were a pair of brothers, Rob and Mark Cullen. So the title Cop Out is what they eventually settled on, but the original title was A Couple of Dicks. Then it changed to A Couple of Cops, and then it almost became Cop Suckers. The movie takes place and was filmed in New York. The reason why Smith directed this film is it was the type of movie his late father would have loved. Gold Circle Films was the original studio to have the rights to the movie, and they were going to have Robin Williams and James Gandolfini as the two main characters. But when that never came to fruition, they sold the rights to Warner Brothers in 2008. So obviously Bruce Willis and Tracy Morgan play the two main characters in this film. But at one point, even before Kevin Smith came onto the project, Warner Brothers was in talks with Will Ferrell and Mark Wahlberg. But the two of them instead decided to do a different buddy cop movie called The Other Guys, which in my opinion was the better choice. Now, Kevin Smith and Bruce Willis had recently performed together as actors on Willis's film Live Free or Die Hard. During that time, they got along really well, and Willis apparently even mentioned he would love to appear in one of Smith's films. Then we jump ahead 3 years to this film, where apparently Smith and Willis did not get along at all. Smith states that Willis was combative and unpleasant on and off set, while Willis, on the other hand, disliked Smith's direction and says that he was always high. Bruce Willis apparently even once said to Kevin Smith, "I'm Bruce Willis. I've been Bruce Willis successfully for 25 years. How long have you been Silent Bob, motherfucker?" Smith would actually get so upset with Willis that when he would retire back to his trailer, he at one point punched 3 holes in the wall. His assistant then named them Die Hard 1, 2, and 3. Smith also states that Tracy Morgan's funny and good-natured demeanor was the only thing that got him through the film. With Bruce Willis's recent diagnosis of dementia, Kevin Smith has now come out and said that he does regret some of the things he said about Willis, especially because looking back at it, he's not sure if there was some level of this that Willis was already dealing with. Sean William Scott, who has a cameo in the film, states that it was always fun on set as Smith would allow for a lot of improvisation. Here are some other actors that made cameos in this film as well. Jason Lee, who also would work along with Kevin Smith in quite a few of his films. Ernest O'Donnell, who's in almost every Kevin Smith film. Comedian Jim Norton. Kevin Pollak as Hunsaker. Adam Brody as Mangold. Guillermo Diaz as Po' Boy. Rashida Jones as Debbie. Michelle Trachtenberg as Ava. Fred Armisen as the Russian lawyer. And Francie Swift as Pam. Also, did you happen to know that the student driver that hits Bruce Willis's character with his car in the film was actually a Make-A-Wish kid? Both Jason Mewes and Ben Affleck were approached to appear in the film, but at the time neither one was available. This was also the first Kevin Smith film to not be produced by Scott Mosier, as he was working on directing his own film. This movie was also the final straw for Kevin Smith when it came to making mainstream movies, as he would go back to what he knew, which was independent films. Near the beginning of the movie, Tracy Morgan is quoting a bunch of films, and at one point says the quote, "Yippee-ki-yay, motherfucker," which of course is Bruce Willis's line from Die Hard. Willis's character reacts as if he hasn't seen that movie that's from. So when it comes to the film Cop Out, I really did not like this movie. Unfortunately, I just felt that there was little to no story. The characters were not likable at all. And I may be one of very few people to feel this way. I don't find Tracy Morgan all that funny. So, unfortunately, I'm going to be giving this movie a 1 out of 5. Now, if you did like Cop Out, other movies I recommend checking out are The Other Guys, Let's Be Cops, any of the Bad Boys movies, and Taxi. Now it's time for the trivia question from the beginning of this episode. What baseball card is Jimmy trying to sell to pay for his daughter's wedding? The card is a 1952 Andy Pofko, which in the film is stated at being worth $80,000, and since his daughter's wedding is $50,000, he would have some left over for himself. I hope you enjoyed this episode of Askewed Reviews, and if there's a movie you'd like to see get a review, just mention it in the comments.